Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dr. Grant Show. I am excited to bring to you my guest. Her name is Tsao Lin Moy. She is the founder of Integrative Healing Arts. What's special about her and what I'm so enamored of and so excited about bringing her on the show for is I was drawn to a post that she placed on LinkedIn talking about natural ways to help with anxiety. But as we've been chatting, we've been seeing a lot of anxiety popping up pertaining to aging. So we want, and we'll be covering today, natural ways to help with anxiety as you age. And the reason why this is so important for you, especially if you are a person that struggles with emotional eating, food binges, food addiction, is often anxiety plays a significant role in your health and it subtracts years. I'm sure we could go more into this as we progress, but this is why it's important. You want to find natural ways to help with your anxiety, especially as you're aging, because all of us have that in common. We're aging whether we like it or not. She's also the author of the book, Will I Ever Get Pregnant? The Smart Woman's Guide to Getting Pregnant Naturally Over 40. Tsao Lin Moy, I could talk about you all day. Tell people some wonderful, wonderful things about you. I think it's better to hear from you versus me gabbing all day.
Oh my goodness. Well, I am very happy to be here. We had a very exciting conversation even before you started. My name is Tsao Lin Moy. I'm an acupuncturist and Chinese medicine practitioner with a brick and mortar practice in New York City, Union Square. So I see people in person and practicing for over 20 years. My specialty, I treat a lot of things. My specialty is in fertility, where I help women find better and natural ways to get pregnant naturally so they don't have to undergo painful or invasive, procedures just to have a baby, right? So there's a lot, and as we talked earlier, like ideas around women and their bodies and, what they're supposed to look like and be like. And then we got on, I also do anti-aging, like that's part of, rejuvenation, staying young and healthy. And within the context of Chinese medicine, we're really looking at longevity, health, wellness. We look at what is a new term I found is known as your health span, right? Not just your lifespan, but really your health span. And that's longevity. If you're going to live a long time, you also want to be you want to be healthy to enjoy it.
Yes.
Yeah, and I know the post that you saw about anxiety, you know, so many people experience anxiety. They may not even know that they're experiencing it, right? Until it disappears. So they always have a little nervousness or adrenaline flowing. Definitely in New York, we see, people very type A personality. And so there are many different factors that contribute to that. And for sure, if you think your body's falling apart and you're aging, that is going to tick that anxiousness up, right? And so we see it. Yeah, we see it in digestive problems, the weight gain,
Mhm.
poor sleep, hormonal fluctuations, emotional ups and downs. Like a lot. There's so many things. And then of course, what happens is that in order to feel better, uh, the with brain chemistry, people start hitting different kinds of foods or doing certain behaviors to soothe themselves, right?
Yeah.
And then the result is maybe they're not looking so good or feeling so good, and then that kind of creates a negative cycle, a feedback loop.
You're correct on that. That feedback loop is something I would like to dig a little bit deeper into that people are sometimes unaware of. It can be overt, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. Your feedback loop can be overt in the form of, like you mentioned, overeating. It could be a feedback loop in the form of even verbalizing certain things you swore you weren't going to say, especially for us moms that have kids. You're finding yourself saying things that you swore that you wouldn't say because your parents said those, and you're wondering, how did this come out of my mouth?
how to come out of your mouth. How about what you're putting in your mouth? Like, yeah. So those are those patterns, and we chatted about them. There, that's that programming that's in there that all of a sudden, and it's actually kind of a funny thing you say that because how did that come out of your mouth? People say like, "Oh my God, I sound just like my mother," right? But that's a good indication of that programming in there that just is like shooting out. And until you actually heard it, you might have been unaware that you were actually doing these things. If you're wondering like, I don't understand like why I do this, and you're like, oh, because the programming is it's there, and then but once you're aware, you have a choice, and that's always the challenge. You got to do things differently, right?
Mm.
And then that's where the battle comes.
There is a battle, but I will say this: it's a battle if you don't have the tools.
Correct.
In my digital wellness practice, that's what we have fun with. We give and customize the tools based on a person's schedule, their aptitude for their life. Because if you're working a really busy, hectic, crazy schedule, something that takes 2 hours, like a 2 hour meditation, it could be very effective, but it's certainly not going to be very practical to implement.
That's right. It's right. I mean, and that's what I have to, it's interesting because you made me think about, when people go away on a retreat and they're like, oh, this is great, all my food and my exercise and well, I'm gonna get back, I'm gonna do the same thing. And what happens is that they can't because their environment, the system or the way that they have their life set up is such that keeps them to go back into another pattern.
Mm.
And but what is interesting is to once you're taken out of that environment is to recognize the things that you need to make changes. And so for instance, when I'm working with women with fertility, when they're experiencing not getting pregnant, that a lot of it they move forward without having taken care of their underlying health.
Mm,
And
yeah.
as we talked about before, like like problems with fertility, or I would say even like with weight loss,
Mhm.
is really a symptom of underlying health stuff, both, emotionally, energetically, spiritually, physically, right? All of those
Yes.
are involved.
Mhm.
And so we need to like just look at like a bigger picture, and instead of trying to like fix everything, is really just address like a couple of little things that are very doable so that you have the win, right?
Yes.
You're like, I can do this, right? So when you have like a little success and you're like, oh my God, I completed the quiz,
Yes.
on time, or I got my paperwork in, or I did whatever, and you feel good and you're like, oh, and that wasn't so hard. Like it was hard, but now I know how to do it. And then you have the motivation. If you
Yes.
pile on, like I need to stop this, then and what'll inevitably you can't do it. Because if you could have done it, you would have done it before, right?
Yes.
So if you're still in a situation to make changes, you need to have support,
Yeah.
right? And not be like, I'll just do it on my own. It's really get some support. And then with each little win,
Yes.
that's going to be incentive to make those shifts, and it'll be a lot easier to do, right?
Yes.
But
And I agree with you completely.
yeah.
That's also something in psychology called building your self-efficacy. And there are mounds and mounds of clinical studies on this, but translation, long story short, if you have low self-efficacy, meaning you don't believe that you can do this thing, and then you decide after coming away from a retreat for a week that I'm going to overhaul my life and I'm going to take these habits, these 2 hour meditations, the all vegan diet into my now real world. Oh, and the vegan diet takes how long to prepare? You already have some low self-efficacy going there because you're not really sure in the subconscious level whether or not this is even going to be viable. But people that have high self-efficacy and how you build that is with those small wins. Maybe we don't start with a 2 hour meditation coming off of that retreat and the vegan diet that takes 3 hours to prepare, and you already have this busy lifestyle. It creates a self-defeating habit loop where your self-efficacy begins to go down and down and down. And then the next time that you try to embrace a healthier behavior to, for example, get pregnant, your subconscious mind is already feeding you the story saying, remember the last time you tried to do these healthy things and it didn't work out so well. So why should we even try? Or you make a half-hearted attempt at it and then you self-sabotage and you're back to square one all over again.
Right. Well, actually, what happens is you build the habit of failure,
Mm-hmm.
right? You build the habit of it's not going to work, and then you prove to yourself that it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's also the idea of congruence, like your behavior, so that is going to make sense that, oh, it won't work, and therefore I can, and then that is like a nice tight little package. But really, the making the smaller, doing the smaller steps, and also like one step at a time. Now, the idea then, which is like a chapter in my book that I talk about, is this thing of perfection. So
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes there's this idea of I want this perfect body or to have a perfect pregnancy or the way it should be to get pregnant and have a baby or how it like that is somewhere floating around,
Mm-hmm.
and then that interferes with how you're going to receive it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like because you're going to receive, yeah, so they get all stuck on it has to be a certain way, and a lot of it you've got to give, you have to just allow that the way you're going to do things is going to be you're experimenting with yourself, right? You know what your results are going to be,
Yes, yes,
and you have to just try different things to just
yes.
try a little bit differently, do something different, if anything different, not perfect but different, and you break the cycle, right?
Not perfect, just different.
Yeah, because you got to break your pattern.
Hmm. Yes, I agree with you. And that makes perfectly good sense. And oftentimes we're so habituated into something needing to be the way that our parents told us it needs to be, or our grandparents told us that they need to be, or the way our friend's pregnancy was, or, the way my friend's weight loss was, or, the person seems to be so calm. That was their journey. That's what worked for them. All of us are unique. I'm certain from your practice, you've definitely seen cases where everyone's unique and what works for one person doesn't always work
Everyone
to.
is, yeah, and actually that's in a very in the classical, Chinese medicine texts. They talk about same disease, different treatment,
Mm,
same treatment, different disease. So when you look at what is the underlying thing,
mm,
like if somebody has a problem in one area, it manifests in different kind of symptoms, but the
mm,
underlying problem is it.
mm,
So, for instance, like a really clear is like sleep is an issue. We don't get enough sleep, restorative sleep. Now, for some people, if they don't get enough restorative sleep, they're going to gain weight, right? Because of the
right,
cortisol. Or the
right.
reason they're not sleeping is because of the cortisol.
Mm,
Like, and that like jumps them up. So maybe there's another thing where they've got more depression, right? That's because serotonin is manufactured in, during sleep in your gut, et cetera, et cetera.
mm,
So for that person, they may be manifesting with more feelings of depression and moodiness and other kinds of things. But the root problem is the sleep issue. So we
mm.
need to address their sleep versus chase the symptoms. Of course, in Chinese medicine, we do something called the root and the branch. So we're going to treat the symptom and we're going to address the root at the same time. So you do
I
both.
love, I
Yeah.
love.
So otherwise you're kind of like you imagine you're spinning around on a wheel in the center, that's the center, and then the symptoms are going around. You got to be able to make the connection in there. Yeah.
I love
So
that.
yeah, and for everyone else, you look at why are they not sleep, like inflammation, many different things. There's usually one thing that is more of a priority that is like the tipping point that
Mm,
then is like creates this um what do you call it? Like a domino effect, right?
mm.
And so we only see the symptoms of it, but you go, okay, we got to like hit what's really going on under there.
You know what? Inflammation. I wrote an article a few months ago about inflammation, and it went off the charts in terms of being popular. From your experience, does inflammation play a role in anxiety and aging? If so, how so? And from your observations, what have you seen?
Oh my God. Oh, yes.
Okay.
So Yes. So it's like everyone goes like, there's one thing that, yes, inflammation. So, and we look in tandem, like inflammation, stress, inflammation, because those are, I don't believe you can have inflammation with that, because inflammation is a stressor on the body. And so when we think of stress, we usually think of it as like one event, like, oh my God, this was terrible, ooh, whatever. And now, like, time has passed and I'm okay. But that one event is more like, you look at like, how did that influence your body's response over time, and then repeat, repeat. So with inflammation, so for instance, let's say you are not getting enough sleep, so your body is not able to restore and regenerate. So you start to build up inflammation. And this is very common, that we've got, our livers are very kind of toxic, right? Because they need to filter everything. So we start to have is like low grade or constant inflammation. That in turn means that we have a buildup of metabolic waste and toxins. We don't feel good, right? The inflammation actually affects our mood, right? All of so it's our entire body gets bathed in chemicals. So
Okay.
we're becoming very irritated. And the more we've got the stress hormones, then are also kicking in. It's not just when we have like negative thoughts or scary thoughts, but those are then causing systemic inflammation, breakdown of connective tissue. Like the first thing that happens when someone has a lot of stress and isn't sleeping, what do you see? You see that their face starts to sag, right? They look gaunt. They don't look good, right?
Right.
Because it starts to break down the connective tissue, and also the lymph is not able to, flow and to regulate. So that all of a sudden you've got more toxicity built in the body, and that creates like aging,
Mm,
degeneration.
mm,
So there are, we really need to make sure that we're moving, right? Our body is moving, that we're helping it. So sitting in front of computers all day is not, I think, uh, what our bodies are meant to do.
so these are some solutions to, and
To
of
get
course,
up, and you really need to move. We really need to move. At least like one, every hour we should get up and do some kind of little bit of stretching and movement.
okay.
Right? So I was so this is like something to help remove like the metabolic waste that builds up, right,
Okay.
in our system. So we're going to help by, we do movement, exercise, a muscle squeeze, help to move that out. We need to make sure that we're hydrated,
Mm,
drinking plenty of water to help flush out the system.
mm,
And then also really like looking at certain foods which are very inflammatory, like a
mm,
lot of processed foods, even if they're like healthy, a lot of them, they're already processed. And
mm,
so there's a lot of whatever goes into the processing of it is not really compatible for our digestion.
mm,
And studies now more with gluten,
mm,
definitely there's, more 80% of the population has a sensitivity to gluten, right?
mm.
They don't have to have celiacs.
Okay.
But if you don't have a good gut, like your intestinal microbiome is not balanced, what you're going to have is also more moodiness, more allergies and sensitivity. And then again, we see more of this. People have food sensitivity, allergies. That's inflammation, right? So those are things we don't always think of it, an allergy as inflammation, but it is inflammation,
So
right?
here's a question for you.
Yeah.
When we start talking to people about changing their eating habits, some people take a all or nothing approach, and that's terrifying. Is it helpful to gradually ramp up, where maybe I take out one or two meals that normally would contain gluten and then build from there? Does it have merit from what your
Oh,
observation?
yes, yes. I would say, well, okay, so one thing, like you have to, if you are going to make one, like a huge change, or just remember, that's also disruption to the system, even if it's like good stuff, quote unquote.
Mm,
Basically, you are like you're getting traumatized, right?
Okay.
You gotta, like, so yeah, so you want to be able to gently do that.
Mm.
With gluten, I really think I would in order to check, and more than likely, if you stop eating that, you're going to feel better no matter what.
Mm.
um the But I would like just remove it.
Mm.
So if you kind of go once in a while here and there, and initially, the thing is that the sensitivity can then be triggered, a couple of days later, which is really hard for people to say, but I haven't had any gluten in 2 days. How could this be showing up? And really, because it's in your system.
Oh, so
So,
they.
yes, if you're going to, I would like, make changes. You can have gluten-free pasta. You can have, great different kinds of crackers, like sesame and rice crackers. If you need some kind of thing, you can
Mm.
eat rice. There are a lot of options right now to just
Mm.
like remove it. And especially if someone wants to lose a little bit of weight, kind of like lowering their carbs,
Mhm.
to kind of just like, okay, look at, like, what do you have? Bagels in the morning, you have this at lunch, and you start to see, like, oh, you're eating a lot of kind of bready, gluten-y things,
Mhm.
to, remove, like, change that up. And you'll
Mhm.
feel better. I mean, people feel, they just like, they feel better.
Mm.
Also the glycemic, right? With a
Right.
lot of the pastas and the bread, they also convert to sugar readily, and sugar is also very inflammatory.
Mm.
So those are,
Yes, sugar
yeah,
is.
yeah.
Mhm.
So those are things I would say, like, okay, sugar, and also artificial sweeteners, um, those are processed. Remember, it's processed.
Okay.
Better to have a little maple syrup or honey, or actually real sugar
Mhm.
that your body can metabolize, versus artificial sweeteners.
What about sweeteners such as monk fruit extract and stevia? What about those?
I don't know about monk fruit, but I'm not a fan of stevia, because,
Mm.
again, anything that it actually affects, like, the insulin levels, and it's very sweet. Right? So
Mm.
our brain doesn't really recognize, it recognizes the sweet.
Mm. Okay.
So once, when people get off of sugar,
Mhm.
they find that they don't miss it.
Mm.
They get off of it. And it's like, you can still have, like, dark chocolate, like cacao, like all of those things. But most of the foods that we have either added sugar or a lot of sodium, because of the taste buds.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. But
Okay.
once you get off, you'll be like, oh, yeah, because monk fruit, yeah, it has it's sweet. But many of these alternative things, you like shakes and desserts, it's really that it's still like like needing this idea of having this sweet flavors, but usually like a lot. It's like
Mhm.
way over beyond. Like, whenever I've tasted those, I'm like, this is just too sweet for me. I'm
I
like, oh, it's too sweet.
I think sometimes it has to do with how it's prepared too. Now, let me
Yeah,
make this one thing
yeah.
that are listening. Some people, at least for my clients, I don't know about yours, they always express concerns of, okay, you tell me to get the gluten-free cracker, I bring it home, I paid X number of dollars for this thing, and it's not the financial portion, it's just the principle of the matter, and I hate it. So here's my recommendation for people that are in that camp, because it can begin to add up. Find a store in your area, since this is broadcasted worldwide, find a store in your area and double check their return policy. So that way, if you do happen to grab, say, gluten-free cracker and you positively despise it, you wouldn't even feed it to the birds in your backyard, that you know that you can return it comfortably.
Well,
This
I don't
way.
know how much you can give it to somebody to, invite people over. Well, I've actually, so I mean, I can actually tell you a brand that I absolutely love, which is like so good.
Mm.
And but also, like the rice crackers,
Mhm.
those are really tasty. They
Mhm.
have, like, with tamari sauce. I mean, there's lots of really tasty things. People don't even realize that they're gluten free.
Mm.
Like,
Mm.
rice crackers are gluten free.
Mm.
So there's a lot of alternatives out there. I mean, it used to be that like health food tasted like cardboard.
Yep,
I mean, I
cardboard.
remember that. I remember that. But the thing is, there are a lot of recipes and you can go onto YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
There's so
Mhm.
many recipes right now to
Yes,
make things that are so delicious.
yes,
There's cauliflower. I don't know if you
yes,
know that, like cauliflower pizza or the
yes.
the so there's plenty. And actually the story of the woman who founded that company,
Mm,
like she started making this because she had gluten intolerance. I think she had celiacs, and so she still wanted to do pizza night with her kids, and so she
mm.
created a cauliflower pizza crust, and it
Yeah,
took off.
get out of town. I didn't know that. I just
Yeah,
received the benefits of the cauliflower pizza crust. We were so inspired that we're actually even growing cauliflower in our garden. So I'm elated to have homegrown.
yeah. Well, you know what? I mean, I don't know about you, but I personally get really excited about making foods
Yes.
and doing things. So, for instance, like I don't drink milk.
Hmm.
People go like, "Wow, your skin, like what's going on?" I'm like, I don't drink milk. I don't
Hmm.
I just stopped with like dairy because like, you know what? That's kind of inflammatory. Like it's milky, it's hard to digest, and
Hmm.
it's just, you know, probably not great, so I'm going to stop that.
Hmm.
And instead I make almond milk. Well, I
Yes.
was looking at almond milk and I was like, I don't like the way it is in the store. Like it tastes funny, and they got these stabilizers, and
Mhm.
they try to make it taste like cow milk. And so I was like, oh, I'm gonna, I'll make my own. And so I started making my own, of course, experimenting
Mhm.
until, I found the right combination, which was like
Really?
almonds and some cashew. And I
Okay.
also put in pistachio.
Okay.
And so I have like a almond cashew pistachio milk,
Oh,
and tastes great.
huh.
And yeah, so there, if you
That's
don't
exciting.
find it in the store, I
Mhm.
mean, when you make it yourself, and
Mhm.
like this is another thing, you feel like, wow, I've like done this, I tried all these different methods, and this is really good. This is like the good stuff. I know what's in it.
I love that. Yes, yes. I would say
Yeah.
transition. That's one huge thing before we wrap up. Start by finding ways to substitute out your meals for meals that you've made. You know exactly what's in it. You can control the amount of ingredients that go into your food when you start cooking more. And it doesn't have to be this massive thing. It's just some experiments, just like she's saying. Find things that work for you according to your taste buds. It's not as time and labor intensive as you might think. It's really, really easy.
It is. I mean, so here's another, the little, do you know what are they called? Like the spring rolls. They're like very clear. Those are little rice wrappers that are dry. You put a little water on them and they're translucent. And
Yes,
you can put them with vegetables,
yes.
roll them up, and like that's gluten free. I mean,
Mhm,
there's a lot of foods that are out there
mhm.
that you can actually, which are really tasty,
Yes,
and um, you can make them very healthy, even healthier.
yes,
And so someone thinks of vegetables, they're like, oh, steamed broccoli,
yes,
but you shred carrots and cucumbers and put it all together, a little tofu or some chicken, some
yes,
brown chicken, and you put it into a nice little wrapper, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so nice and great.
yes.
Like, okay, presentation. You also want to eat beautiful food.
Yes, presentation. And I would also say texture. And we have a cooking segment that comes up on the show periodically to break that down a little bit more. But you'd be really surprised, guys, how just simply shredding your cabbage, shredding your broccoli, adding certain sauces, you want that blast of flavor, and your palate is immensely satiated. You're also full, and you don't feel like you're missing out on anything. It's just getting into the habit of doing these things instead of the way that you normally did it, where maybe you just threw the chopped up broccoli in your skillet and you cooked it. Instead, try shredding it. I've shredded Brussels sprouts, I've shredded cabbage, and added it to certain dishes, and it completely transforms everything. It's a texture that changes the way your mouth perceives the taste. I could go on and on
Exactly.
about this.
Exactly. You know, like you see, I'm like, yeah, you shred it, you get the zoodler, like you can
yes.
do, like there's so many different, there's so many different things in a way to present the food versus, just, so, I mean, I think that is, we could notice like the 10 fingers of virtue. When you're
Mhm.
actually preparing your food, you're infusing it with energy, right?
Yes.
That energy of like, I'm making this beautiful food for myself,
Mhm.
nourishing yourself with your chi and energy, grateful for, the plants that
Mm.
have absorbed all the nutrients, and then you're going to share, they're sharing their nutrients. And yeah, I think when you're preparing your own food, it's a level of mindfulness about and care what goes in.
I agree. Okay, we're gonna have you come back for a second segment. I can see this already. For people that really are loving everything you're talking about and they want to chat with you, even if they're in the New York area, they just want to have a consultation, where
Sure.
can they find you?
Okay, so they can, there's my website, which is the integrativehealingarts.com. And I'm also on Instagram, which is Integrative Healing Arts NYC. And I can also provide links, as you found me on LinkedIn. Uh, but the probably the easiest there, and they can like tap on my link tree in the Instagram, and yeah, find out more things. Like I have little quizzes that I've done and stuff like that, which is in the link tree, right? So
Mhm. All right, guys, you heard it right here. You now know where to find her. I highly recommend you check out her site. I've looked at it myself. It's very engaging. Her book is also amazing. She has tons of media coverage. She's been featured all over from Dr. Oz to I could give a long litany, but she is absolutely wonderful person to talk to work with, and also to feel safe in expressing what your desires are and your goals, and for her to support you there. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching the Dr. Grant Show. You can find us on edibleaddiction.com. We are live on Wednesdays at 9 o'clock a.m. And we're also featured on Saturdays at 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. And we'll be moving to television soon to your local channel near you. Thank you so much.
awesome.
Much love to you guys. Bye.